all the little nuances of sparring, how we can make sparring better, how we can avoid some of the pitfalls of sparring. That's become a hot topic, right? Hard sparring, should you hard spar, things like that. We're going to talk about that a little bit, along with all the other stuff that, I don't know, at least from what I can see, most people don't talk about, at least on YouTube. Hey guys, Coach Keith Keppner here. This video, like all of these long form videos, and probably almost all the content I do, is only for serious people. That it doesn't mean that you're at an advanced level, but whatever level you are, you're serious about your craft and what you're doing with boxing, whether you're just getting into boxing, you've done it for a while, maybe you're a coach, things like that. And to be clear, all this stuff is not, it might not be brand new to you, especially if you've been around. I know a lot of people watch this channel that have done boxing for decades or been around it for decades, but reminding you of something you forgot about. There is so often that I hear something, whatever, by another coach or whatever, and I'm like, man, I've been slipping on that. I've been forgetting about that. So having those reminders is so important, or just hearing the same concept described a different way. And so a lot of benefits to it, and that's where, again, we're building a great community with this channel, and I really appreciate everyone's involvement and support. By the way, guys, make sure you stick around till a little bit later, because I'm going to talk about my 4-step process to take someone from zero, no experience in boxing whatsoever, to their first fight, and how you do that with sparring. And then on the very last part of the video, I'm going to give you my 8 tips for safe sparring. So make sure you stick around for that one till the end. All right, guys, so first off, let's talk about sparring versus fighting, because if you've been boxing for a while, you know the difference, or you know at least a lot of the differences. But I see time and time again, because we work with a lot of folks that are at any level, and a lot of people are at 0 level. They don't understand the idea of they call sparring fighting, right? So yeah, the other day I was fighting with so and so, and I'll hear them say that, and I'm like, hey, dude, no, you weren't fighting. Don't start saying that, because then they go out in the world and they talk to non-boxing people or people that don't know them and know that they're a rookie. And they're like, yeah, man, I was fighting last Saturday. I fought Tuesday. I fought, 2 weeks before that. I fought the week before that, And it's like, man, this guy's a lot of fights. No, you have a lot of sparring. Maybe it's hard sparring, which is sometimes close to fights, but they're different things, right? So what makes them different? And it's funny too, because one of my guys that he won regionals last year for Golden Gloves and went to nationals. He is funny. So he used to do that when he first started boxing, like 2020. He'd be the guy that was like, yeah, the other day I was fighting Dean. And I was like, no, you were sparring. Well, coach, like we were punching each other. We're punching each other pretty hard, and we were going at it because they're same level and whatnot. Or the other, I was sparring some guy from another gym. I was fighting some guy from another gym. No. And it wasn't until he started fighting, actually doing actual competition fights, that he's like, oh, there's a difference. So then it's funny, he was in the car, we were driving back from some hard sparring with a newer guy, and the newer guy was saying, yeah, so in my first fight tonight, and we're like, dude, no, that wasn't a fight. He's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, see, Christian, same exact thing that you used to. He's like, oh yeah, I used to do the same exact thing. So funny stuff. But hard sparring is close to a fight sometimes, but what's the difference? And again, you guys that have experienced the two differences know, but people will do different things in an actual fight than in a sparring. Even a hard, freaking, seemingly 100% sparring session where someone's trying to knock you the hell out. People will do stuff different in a fight. There's a different level of intensity, of pressure, that there's only this many rounds to do the job, right? And there's no retries. There's no like, hey, can we get in again a little bit later to do that? You can't do that. In sparring, you can do that. In a fight, you cannot. So that automatically changes the pressure. You see people in sparring do stuff a certain way. In a fight, when everything's on the line, they'll do some things different. Maybe they'll do some things worse, or they'll, for instance, one thing that just comes to mind that I know I've seen is people just like punching out, right? Just going hard, nonstop punching out. People typically are not going to do that in a sparring situation, like as an amateur. But in a fight, and it's the last round, someone might go out there and try to just freaking like blitz out their punches and go nonstop because, I mean, that's it after that. They're done after that. They spent, they traveled to the fight. They have spent all day sitting at that damn fight, and they're like, dude, I want to make sure I get the W on this one. So you're going to see some things in an actual fight that you won't see in sparring, no matter how hard your sparring is. But of course, to get ready for a fight, the closest thing you can do to get ready for a fight is to actually have hard sparring, right? Now, I'm not going to say hard sparring is the end-all, be-all of everything that in the way that you need to spar, but that's why it's an important factor, because if you're going to get prepared for that thing, you got to get the feel for what that is and how it is, all right? Now, to be clear, sparring can be, actually more dangerous than fighting. Yes, it can. You can make the argument that a lot of boxers that have CTE and everything else didn't actually get that from fighting. They got that from sparring. And that's why I think it's really, 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 really important to be careful, because oftentimes we'll treat fights like that's the place where guys get damaged, where actually it's in the gym that they get damaged. And how do they get damaged? Well, because there is second tries and things like that. That is oftentimes why people do get damaged, because there isn't a referee to stop it. There isn't a doctor to stop it. And it's less standardized, it's less regulated. I've seen guys, I've been in positions where I've had to save the guy whose boxer my guy was going against. I had to save, like, basically our sparring opponent. I had to stop it for their sake, and that person's coach was ready to let it keep going. There's been plenty of situations like that, too many that I've seen. Or somebody gets just brutalized, and then, okay, they'll take a break, and then they'll get back in later that same day after they've been concussed, and they'll go in and they'll keep going. And you could say, oh, it's making them tough and this other stuff, and there is a little bit of truth to that, but at what cost? At a cost to the long-term health of the person. And this is what's more important than the sport of boxing is people, right? And the value of human life. So we don't want to destroy human life, ideally, in the pursuit of great boxing. All right? Of course, we're always playing right on that line with boxing. It's a funny, odd sport. It's potentially far more dangerous, also because, for instance, you could get stopped in an let's say, like, as an amateur, right, or even a pro, right? Either level, if you were in a fight and you got stopped, knocked out, it's going to be noted, and you're not going to be able to fight for X number of weeks after that. Sparring, that is not the case, right? I could go and get knocked out today in a gym, drive to another gym that same day and get knocked out again, or 2 days later, whatever, it doesn't matter. And so that's where you're going to cause massive damage, because boxing is a very dangerous sport, and if you're injuring the brain by getting hit with concussive or even just subconcussive blows, the key is the rest in between, right? I mean, obviously, like, damage is damage, and damage can be permanent, but you're going to minimize that if you take the proper rest in between that damage, all right? And of course, there's a lot of nuances to that. But also with sparring, where people get it wrong versus fighting, is that sparring is the best barometer that we have. Okay, so if I want to evaluate your ability as a boxer, we want to see how you do in sparring. Of course, if we're not able to see you do it in five a fight, right? So you get the best idea for how good somebody is if you're not able to observe their fight by how they spar, right? That's the closest thing to the actual sport of boxing is sparring. But it is not a perfect barometer. Okay, so very important point here for you guys that are maybe at an advanced level as an amateur. You've been doing it for a while, and you think you're ready to go pro, right? Or I'll see a lot of times these guys that have like eight fights as an amateur, and they'll spar some pros, and they're like, man, I'm ready, and they'll go pro, and it's a bad decision. Taking a break from the video real quick, just to ask you, if you haven't already, to click like, click subscribe, and click that bell for notifications when new videos are uploaded. I have a new video every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. All right, guys, back to the video. There was this one fighter that I tried to save. There's been a lot of fighters I've tried to save, but there's this one guy, good kid, and he had no amateur fights, but he was just a very strong, very tough guy. and his boxing was basic, was ultra basic, but he was so strong, so tough, and such a good athlete. And he actually, in sparring, gave some pros some trouble, believe it or not. And this was before I was in the picture. And so he was in this gym in Atlanta, and there was a promoter that saw him that was there and was like, hey, man, you're beating up on these pros. Forget this amateur stuff. You know, you got to pay at the time like $70. Now it's like $100, something like that, to register to get your USA Boxing Passbook, da-da-da. Instead of doing all that, how about you get paid to fight? You got a kid that you want to help support. You'll get $800 for this fight. Let's just turn you pro. All you got to do is sign this piece of paper. You know, your fee to get your license as a pro fighter is only like $25, and that's covered by the purse ahead with expenses. And so, yeah, so you'll walk out, you'll net $800 for this fight. And this guy was like, well, that sounds good. And he didn't have anyone good around him to tell him that this wasn't a good idea. So he went and he did it. What happened? Okay, so he was doing okay against pros in the gym sparring, some pros, low-level pros. He goes against a guy who is a low-level pro. But it's an actual fight. It's different. This kid gets knocked the hell out. He got his $800, but he got knocked the hell out. So this happened for a few fights, and then I was in a position where I started coaching, where I stopped boxing. I started coaching fighters, and he was a friend of another guy that I worked with, and so I kind of took him under my wing and helped him get at least through a pro fight. But then after a few fights of working with him, I told him, like, hey, look, this is like trying to paddle up the Mississippi River, and you're starting at the bottom of the Mississippi River. This is impossible, because with 0 amateur fights, or even 5, 10 amateur fights, the likelihood of success is so marginally small. And again, you know, you guys can always name me some fighters. I can name you some fighters too that don't have much, if any, amateur experience that were successful. But there's a reason why you know them, because they are the by far exception, versus the average, or the rule is you get some good amateur experience before you start fighting. All right. So now let's talk about what is the objectives of sparring based on levels. So we're going to break this up into beginner, intermediate, and advanced. Okay. So beginner applies to people that, you know, have 0 to a little bit of boxing experience. Intermediate, you know, you're amateur, you have some fights, things like that, varying levels within that. And then advanced, you have a lot of amateur fights. Let's say you're kind of ready to go pro, maybe you are pro, something along those lines. All right. All right. So first one, with beginners. Beginners with the goals of sparring, right? So why are we sparring, right? Or are we doing it to toughen up? Are we doing it to get in shape, right? Because that's a big danger there, is that while sparring theoretically can get you in shape because it's tough and it demands a lot of you, it's probably the dumbest way to get in shape. So it's a secondary factor to getting in shape. There's a primary factor to getting in shape, which is all the other stuff you do with boxing, which has far less risk associated with it, right? And everything in life is a trade-off of risk and reward. All right. So, but with beginners, the objective to that is just to basically learn boxing, to learn how to do this thing called boxing, to throw punches, how to hit people, how to have punches thrown at them, things like that. The basic foundation that they've been working on in the gym. All right. So that's the first primary objective for a beginner in sparring. Then the second one is that showing that they can actually defend themselves. Right. So it's not enough to be able to deliver the punches and move around the ring. You got to actually, in my opinion, as a beginner, the objective is also to be able to deal with punches that are coming back at you and be able to not get nailed by all of them, be able to start seeing them and things like that. Defense, a big, important part, which is far beyond just hands up, right? Or move your head, something like that. They need to start building up their ability to see things. Then show that they're competitive, right, with a beginner. What do I mean by that? You don't need to be, and again, this is all with the idea of the goal of fighting, all right? So it's not just, I don't know, someone just to say, like, this wants to go and spar just to say they did sparring once, right? But with the goal of fighting in mind. To show that you're competitive as a beginner, right? So you're showing that you can maintain your boxing stance, you can do some of the basic boxing things, you can be defensive, You can block punches, not get nailed by every single punch the other guy throws. And then also as well that you are actually outputting enough punches that would make it reasonably competitive if you were to fight your first amateur fight, right? Because I got guys that will go in there sometimes, beginners, and they'll check off the first 2 boxes, but they won't check off the competitive part where their output isn't enough. They don't do enough. They don't throw enough punches. And it's like, hey, dude, you're fighting like you're fighting a 15-round fight here, and you're number one, you're not that level to make it even work, but also your first fight's going to be 3 rounds. you're doing barely anything for the first 3. We got to get something going. So be competitive. And then the last box with the goals and objectives for beginner sparring is to show their conditioning. It is a barometer of where your conditioning is. Now, a way that it couldn't be, though, very important, because I do hear this one a lot with beginners, is someone will be in great shape. They will be running enough. They'll be in the gym training hard enough. And they go into sparring and they're like trash after a round. Okay? Obvious. That's a first level problem of their boxing ability. They're too tense. They're not breathing, let's say. Different factors like that come into play. So identifying whether it's that or they are in proper condition, they will help you be able to gauge either for yourself or as a coach if they are ready to start to get booked for their first fight, right? If you're not able to do 4 or 5 rounds of sparring, you're not ready for 3 rounds of fighting. Just a good fact that everyone knows, but if you don't, now you do. If you want to get more out of your sparring, stick around for my 3 special sparring tips that you can use at any level to help you become a better boxer. So look out for that part coming right up. Then the next level, intermediate. With intermediate, it's going to be more about building sparring, more about building ring experience, which of course you could say is the first one as well. But you're building up that time with different styles, ideally, and different levels, because we all know we should spar better people than we fight. And if you can get yourself in position to do that, or at least do that sometime, because that can be hard to line up and things like that, depending who's in your gym or just the different available options you have around you. Ideally, though, you want to be quickly sparring people that are better than you're going to be fighting, because then when you go into your fight or your next fight or whatever, you're going to be actually tuned up for that level, and then you'll have an easier time in your fight, right? Versus I've seen the opposite happen, where guys will be the only person in their gym with experience, and they'll be sparring a bunch of guys that literally have no fights and are super green, and they'll think that they're getting ring experience like that. And then inevitably when they actually go to their fight, they look horrible because they don't have the timing down, they don't have anything down. And everything that has been reinforced in the gym has been with kid gloves versus actually getting ready for the real thing and actually progressing them, right? So doing your best to, if you don't have someone in your gym that's at a higher level than you, go out there and get that work, right? Talk to your coach and make sure it's okay, clear with them, but go out there and get that work. A lot of my guys that have 20 plus fights as amateurs, that's something that continually I encourage and approve. Because also too, ideally at 20 plus fights, ideally you're able to defend yourself against a lot of people. And of course, there's certain things you need to watch out for. Some gyms treat you better than others, but if you're able to handle yourself in a situation, then you can go out there and get that work that's at a higher level and get it here and there, so it can tune you up. If you don't have someone in your weight class, let's say in your gym, that's at your level or above you, get that work, because it's going to make a massive amount of difference. And if you're not doing that, you're lying to yourself. I remember there was this one guy when I first started coaching, like you guys have heard maybe in other videos, I started coaching some guys out of this like podunk gym in the country, and there was a lot of MMA guys. There's like this MMA program there. So I remember there's this one MMA fighter, and they were telling him, hey, you need to go do this, right? Like what I'm saying, you need to go to this other gym, no matter if you don't like them because you feel like they're better than you or whatever, but you need to go there and you need to train there, get some work there, because you're getting to that level. And he's like, oh, well, I don't want to do that. And he never did that. And he really never progressed to the next level. All right, so don't let that be your problem. Then the next one, so get that ring experience under intermediate, is work on techniques, experiment. This is where it becomes the laboratory, sparring, where it allows you to don't freaking play, don't ever play, but work on different things, try different things, experiment. That's the best way to say it. Is it's like your laboratory, and you're gonna do things that you're not gonna do in a fight because there's too much pressure sometimes, right? Particularly depending what level you are. But you're gonna take those chances, and that's the time, not in your fight. It's not the time in your fight to start like, I'm gonna try this new move that I've never done before, right? So in sparring, you're gonna try different counters, perhaps try to lead different ways, try different setups, different footwork ideas. And that is the time to do it at that kind of intermediate level and in sparring. Then reinforcing foundations, because I'm big on the foundation. So you always want to go back to reinforcing the foundations. Make sure you're not getting too far from that. It's really easy when guys get to kind of an intermediate level for them to be like, okay, in sparring, I'm going to do this and this because I'm experienced, and I'm going to drop my hands all the time, or just do things that are not reinforcing the foundation that you want to make sure is still there. So just always be reinforcing the foundation. And the last one with intermediate is it is also still a conditioning check, right? It's to see, hey, have you been putting all the work in outside of sparring? And if you're not able to do enough rounds in sparring, then that shows that you're not doing the work outside of sparring, and you need to focus on that as well. And then the last thing with that, with intermediate as well, is that are you progressing with sparring, right? As a beginner, it's all new to you, so you're going to progress, hopefully, most of the time, pretty quickly from sparring to sparring, generally, if you're doing the basic work required. But as an intermediate, it becomes also even more revealing because, hey, if your coach or you are identifying holes in your game, and then you go in your next few sparring sessions and you're not working on those holes, there's a big problem. And then over the course of months now, that's just something that you're stuck with that's a big hole. Oh, I always get hit by the right hand, or I always have trouble with this thing, right? And I can think of so many examples of where I've taken my guys and had them work on, let's say I have a guy that's very, very, very aggressive, but he has problems when that aggression doesn't work out in his favor, right? When certain things and dynamics change in a fight. So I've had him in sparring, for instance, just work on boxing the whole time, not smothering his punches, not leaping in, not just like trying to throw aimlessly, but trying to be a sharpshooter a little bit. Work on those things with his sparring so that therefore, when he comes into a fight, he has a little bit of that under his belt that he can now bring and expand himself as a fighter. All right, and then going on to the last level with sparring. So we have your advanced. So you might know who you're fighting. Maybe if you're pro, obviously you're probably gonna know who you're fighting. But elite level amateur, you might have an idea in your state who you're going to go against and take out at that time. So you're going to be a little bit more preparing for a certain individual, right? You're going to be working on different strategies and tactics to prep for that opponent, okay? And that is, of course, where having good training partners that are able to give you those looks, right? To give you those different styles, to mimic a guy that you might be going against, and to work on those strategies and tactics that you and your coach have devised to use and implement, all right? And so then last thing with advanced, really, because again, to be clear, it checks all the other previous boxes as well, but additional points is also just sparring becomes a thing to build up or to regain or to keep your timing, your ability to time punches, your ability to just shoot shots at the right time, react in the right ways, to have the proper spacing, range, and everything else, all kind of encompassed under the word timing in boxing. But you want to work on your timing. And that's where, with some of my guys that have been boxing for a while, that's something that I've been preaching with them, is that, hey, in this session and over these next few sparring sessions, I just want you to work on timing, because their counters aren't as sharp as they could be. They're not throwing it in the right spaces. And you see a big difference when sometimes you just go into a sparring session and your only focus and your only goal is to work on timing, right? Timing and placement. All right, guys, so let's jump into my 3 special tips for sparring. All right, I got 3 of them. Here's number 1 is if you want to increase your reflexes and your speed, work with smaller people, right? It's something really obvious, but not a lot of people think like this. I remember my dad told me about when he was boxing in the CYO gym in Chicago. He used to, I think he was 135. This is back when all the weight classes were the same as pro. He was 135, and he would spar against a guy who was way smaller. And he said, like, people will give him crap in the gym about it, but it made his reflexes faster. It made him be able to react to those fast punches better and be able to get his shots out quicker and be able to hit a guy that if his head's over here, bam, and he's going to move faster versus if you're always sparring with people your own size or always people that are a little bit bigger, they're going to be a little bit slower on average, and you're not going to develop that timing and that speed ability. And so therefore, when you go into your fight, though, if you're always going against smaller people, man, you're going to have reflexes, you know, if you're a middleweight, like a lightweight. And that's going to be a big benefit for you. Then the second one is kind of the opposite of that. The benefits of sparring people heavier than you. I have seen this play out time and time again, where when we can spar people bigger than us, it allows you to do what? It allows you to throw your punches even harder. You get to throw punches with maximum amount of power. And I know I might catch some heat on this, but I mean, this is boxing. But if I have let's say a pro guy who's 160, and I have him spar a cruiserweight, that could happen. That's fine. And man, my middleweight can freaking unload his hardest punches. I've had a middleweight spar a heavyweight, and my guy's focus is to throw maximum power. And I tell you, you see a difference because also you feel it. It's almost like hitting a really heavy bag. Sometimes it encourages you to hit it harder and build up that power because you feel that thing not even move when you hit it. So same thing when you're going against a bigger guy. And then it also allows you to resist punches better. No, not with your head, not taking body shots or something like that. But when a larger guy throws a punch at you and you're going to block it, that's going to be a lot of force on you that is going to be hard to deal with. So if you can get used to blocking those big, more heavy shots, again, you go against someone in your own weight class, it's not going to phase you as much. And then, again, that will allow you to do everything you're going to do better. And then it literally is more, last point on bigger people, it literally costs more energy to go against bigger people typically. Just that extra weight that they have, if you get on the inside with them, they lean on you a little bit. There's just all the things. Maybe it is that you do try to hit them harder so it exerts more energy. So it does provide an actual more conditioning benefit in a sense. But it almost, sparring a bigger person is almost like a conditioning form of sparring along with other technical aspects because they're just bigger and it'll make you a lot more tired. And anyone that has done that, you can vouch for that. Now, the third one is, of my special tips for sparring, is to change the dimensions, right? So we've all seen this stuff like people put their foot in a tire and stuff like that. That's cool. That's fine. But some other ways you can do it is simply, one is if you can change ring sizes, right? So you could put a rope across at belt level, and that breaks the ring into basically a triangle, right? So therefore you got less places to move. Or you could even, I've had guys do this where I'll take a corner and I'll cut off the corner. So now they're stuck in that corner. So, I mean, they can still angle around. They can do, because one thing I don't like about the tire drill where your foot is in there is you're really precariously stuck in this certain place. And I don't know, it just hasn't always made the most sense to me versus, whether you tie someone to another guy or you have them stuck in a phone booth sized area by tying off a corner. That makes more sense to do that inside work. And the benefit to that is, again, don't do this all the time, but sparingly, it will help someone who, let's say, is always tense on the inside. If now you force them to do multiple rounds on the inside and they're in a 3x3 foot space, the only way they're going to make it through that session is by relaxing. And so it's a hard thing. It's a brutal thing. It's not something you do to someone who's just brand new, but it is something that I find is important. as a tool to be used. Let's talk about how we go from 0 to 1, which basically means to go from 0 fights to your first fight, and how we do that with sparring. Now, obviously, there's all this work that gets created and is done outside of sparring, of course, but assuming you're doing all of that, how do we do it with sparring? And remember, this is a good part to watch, even if you are more advanced, as just a refresher and a reminder of some of these concepts, because you can use some of these concepts that I'm talking about with your sparring to change it up, to freshen it up, particularly if you're sparring with other team members. What do I mean by that? By other people in your gym. Yeah, at least with us, we look at it as everyone in our facility is on the same team. So we're here to take care of each other. We're here to help each other get better. And the better your team is, the better you'll be as a boxer. The better work you have in your facility that you train at, the more work is home, less you got to travel for that more advanced work like we're talking about. If you help other guys in your weight class progress and you have a lot of killers at 125 or 165, then because you didn't crush them all before they got a chance to get better, or you didn't help them get better, you know, if you have that work there, you're good, right? You get my point. All right, so let's talk about going from 0 to your first fight with sparring. All right, how we do it with the way we coach and everything else with Keppner Boxing is you start off first when someone is first sparring, right? Their first time, they've never sparred before. I don't care if you're 8-0 in the streets or whatever, right? Which probably means 0-8 in the streets. But I don't care what experience you have outside of boxing. Your first time sparring. We just need to do the jab. That's all we're going to do. We're going to do one variable. Last thing, in my opinion, that you ever want to do is sparring. And I made this mistake when I first started coaching people. Somebody's been training for a little bit of time, and they've done drills and things like that. They know how to stop punches. They know the idea of how to stop punches. Then they get into a sparring session, and you go, okay, we're going to go from you've never sparred to now we're sparring with all punches and everything that goes along with that. Oftentimes, it is just like throwing someone in the deep end, which generally is not a good idea. You do first with the jab, so they learn how to relax. They learn how to not build up more anxiety and more negative associations. So if you can't stop a jab, you can't stop any other punch. And if you can't deal with the jab, the most important punch of boxing, then you're not going to be able to deal with any other punch. So if we're going to do our first time sparring and you've never sparred before, and I'm going to be sparring you, we're just going to jab spar. I'm going to jab you, you're going to jab me, and we're going to do that whenever, right? So you get to be free. You get to do that jab whenever, but it's just a jab. So if you get flustered or anything else, just keep your chin down and put your hand in front of your face, and you probably won't get hit by it. So pretty basic, pretty simple, but it's a great way for someone to dip their toe into that water without just dunking them in, and then they're, you know, freaking out, okay? Then after they got that down, then you add the jab and you have the jab and you add a variable, right? So we're going, again, think about with motor learning, you're going from closed to more open style training, right? You're going from one variable to two variables, and then we're going to go on, as you can imagine, to more variables, right? So what's the next variable to add with the jab? What I recommend is let's add body shots, because you're not going to at least have the concussive possibility, you know, as much. You could concuss someone with a jab, but it's pretty unlikely. So you have the jab now, and you have any body shot you want. So just any shot to the body and just a jab up top. And then another way you could do it is maybe just straight shots only, right? 1s and 2s. So again, if they keep this hand in front of their face, they're theoretically at least going to deflect most of the straight shots, okay? Then you could, another way you could add a variable is by maybe just like lead hand only. And that's something that you could even utilize at a higher level of sparring is, hey, this round only worked that lead hand, or this whole session only worked that lead hand. And that allows you to focus on one overall concept, and it can actually progress you as a fighter. It's always good to sometimes take that step back to more closed forms of training and then go open again. All right. Then after they have, so that's step number 2. So 1 was jab only, 2 was jab plus a variable. Then 3 is we're going to do all of our shots. We're going to put it all together. Now, sometimes when people first spar, like with our facility, they'll maybe do jabs and body shots, right? They'll get the jab down over a couple rounds, and then they got jabs and body shots. And then maybe they won't even do the all shot third part, but they'll do all shots on somebody who's more advanced, and that more advanced person will just jab them. And that's it. Because you know it's not a bad habit for an advanced person to work on defense and jabbing. It's a good thing. All right. Then, So that third level, we do all shots though when they're ready for it. About 75%-ish, right? It's hard to quantify exactly what 75% power of your punches is, but about 75%, right? So they're working, and that's the next level of sparring. Before we do what? We allow you to travel spar. What does travel spar mean? It means we're gonna go to other gyms. We're gonna go to other gyms where people don't know you, you don't know it, it's not familiar, because that's I'm sure you guys can all attest to that have had experience with boxing. When you first start boxing, you'll train in your gym or whatever, where you're used to doing your thing against the people you're used to doing it with, and you start getting pretty good. And that's good. That's first step. But then you go out there and you start, you go against someone that you're like, dude, that guy, I don't even know that guy. And that guy doesn't know you and doesn't care about you and gives you trouble. Or you're in a gym that just totally freaks you out. I remember, man, there's so many stories of this, but there's this one kid I had who, nice kid, but he was he was a white kid, and I took him to this one gym, and it was just, you know, like boxing. It's a wonderful mixture of folks, right? It's where, like George Foreman said, like every race, creed, and background has shed blood in that ring. But it's funny, so this gym is just all black folks, all black folks. And he was kind of raised, I think, probably upper middle class, kind of like white area. And so he just, you know, like our gym is pretty diverse. Like we have a good kind of like 30 of like, you know, Hispanic, black folk, and white folk. But like with him, it was just like, oh man, it was all just like, he just wasn't used to it. And he's like, oh, I could see him right away just getting freaked out. And so we were kind of joking about it though, how this kid was just not used to being in that environment. And so he struggled, and he had to get used to that. Cause like, you know, man, you got to get used to fighting a lot of different types of fighters. I remember back in the day, my dad told me about how in the, I say back in the day to mean the 90s, but in the 90s, like earlier 90s, when they were starting to bring over some of the Eastern Bloc fighters, right? They boxed a bunch of other European style fighters, right? They weren't used to some of these like slick styles that we have in the United States and stuff like that. And so my dad had this guy that to call him a journeyman would have been a compliment, because he was less than that. But he was slick, and you know, he just, you know, he was all the things that you think about when you think about just like kind of a rough and tough guy, and this stiff, you know, kind of stiff at the time, you know, European Eastern Bloc fighter fought this guy as a pro, and got beat up by my dad's guy, who was less than a journeyman. This guy was like a good prospect that people were putting money behind, because he got freaked out by the voodoo or whatever. He wasn't used to some Emmanuel Augustus type stuff, and it just completely threw him the hell off. And yeah, so anyway, getting out there, getting experience with people you're not used to, and having to deal with, again, more of that uncertainty, more of that fear. So that's just really how you progress somebody, because then if they've never done boxing outside of the four walls of their gym that they're training in, or the gym that you're training in, and then you go somewhere else for the first time to do boxing somewhere else, I'm not going to say you can't be successful. You can. You definitely can. But it's just adding an extra layer. We're talking ideals. Ideally, I like someone, it's technically not legal, okay? So don't tell anyone that I have done this. But to do like an exhibition, right? They kind of don't allow, they call them developmental bouts now in amateur. But, you know, to have public sparring, because think about it, that's another element to add. And that's kind of what travel sparring checks off, because oftentimes when you go to spar another gym, they'll kind of have some people around watching and things like that. So it adds that pressure. Versus, again, if you're always sparring, let's say in a closed environment where it's just like you and your buddy, or you and your training partner or whatever, and no one else is ever in the gym at that time, you know, you guys all know there's a different element that happens. And some people like to think that they turn on with an audience, and some people actually don't turn on with an audience. They get more tripped out than they are by themselves, and they got to get used to that. All right. So again, we're looking at deconditioning all of these things that can affect someone's performance before they go into their first fight, because, you know, that's going to be enough of a jump in the deep end. Let's not add some extra anchors onto them to force them down and try to make them drown. Okay. Hey guys, great way to support the channel. Go to that join option, look for level 2. That's where you can send me videos of your sparring, fights, or training. and I'd be happy to give you my tips that will help you get to the next level. Great way to support the channel, and I really appreciate it. Check that out. Now, back to the video. Let's talk about how we have different levels spar with each other. So I touched on some of these things, but let me just kind of run over them in detail. So two main ways that I give you advice on if you're a higher level, you want to spar with someone, or if you're a lower level and you want to get some more work, you can maybe, in a nice, polite way, ask for a higher level guy to work with you like this, perhaps. So just having one variable, one shot, like I talked about earlier, right? Maybe the higher level person just has a jab. So, I mean, that's where I've literally had a pro spar an almost just brand newbie to sparring. The pro just has a jab. The newbie has all their punches, right? And depending on what the sizes are, the pro could even do the jab as hard as he wants. And this other guy who's only sparred a few times, he can deal with that hard jab, you know, especially if he's big enough, strong enough, whatever. But he can also do everything else he does. And so that allows that pro to work on some things he's working on, maybe the jab and some footwork or different defenses or countering with the jab. And it allows the other guy to get some work, right? And then also it builds up some confidence for that newer guy of saying, hey, you know, I was in the ring with this guy, he's a pro. And that helps build up a little bit of that certainty that they can keep themselves safe. Of course, that doesn't mean they need to sign a pro contract or sign up for a pro fight, but it just provides that confidence that's good as they continue to go up those levels, all right? And then the other tool tool number 2 is to just have your guy or you as a more advanced person, whatever, you know, because I used to have this trouble, right? I would spar with lesser people, and the way I was raised on sparring, I would accidentally knock them out and stuff like that. And that wasn't good because I never had that many good training partners. Because what would happen is initially we'd be kind of neck and neck, right? Sometimes they would beat me up and whatnot. And then I would start progressing because we didn't really have like an exact gym that we trained out of at the time. My dad kind of stepped back from the pros and was kind of looking to retire from boxing. And I was kind of, as he would call it, I was his last hurrah, he would say. But so oftentimes we'd get like maybe one or two, a couple other guys around my size that would train with us. So, you know, I was progressing up levels and we would be able to work together, but then I would continue to progress up levels and then I would start beating them up. And then maybe we'd go to travel spar and yeah, maybe I would beat someone up then. But then if I tried to go get some work against another level that was a few notches above me, then I would get beat the hell out of. So it was a situation where it was like always going hard, right? My dad was super old school like that. Every time we sparred, it was sparring to kill people. And there is a benefit for that. There is a benefit for that. Absolutely. I think I mentioned it earlier, but I've seen far too many people goof off when they spar and then they sign up for a fight because they feel all nice and comfortable and then they get the hell beat out of them because they're not used to someone actually fighting. All right, so that's an important thing. But the problem with always sparring hard is you're going to limit the amount of work you can get. So how can you make this happen? Have your guys or yourself not squeeze tight on the end of your punches, right? That is how me, at my size, I could spar with a girl who is 125 pounds and be good work for her and not hurt her. How? By obviously not pushing my shots. You know, don't be like an idiot, but just you can still snap out your punches, same speed, but just have your hand like that. You know, I'm not following through, but I'm just pop, pop. But that way they get used to the same exact timing that they would have from real punches. And everything is the same because what you don't want to do is like go slow motion because then that's just a weird thing too where it's so goofy. The punch starts and then you react to it, but then it's like still coming because the person is extending their arms slow motion. They don't get the proper timing. They don't get the proper feel. And then when they throw their punches, think about it, if I'm throwing out a shot kind of this slow, that allows me to do what? If I'm going out that slow and they slip, I can redirect. Boom. Boom, redirect. And it wouldn't be like that if I actually shot a shot. If I actually shot a snappy punch is more like a bullet versus a heat-seeking missile, right? It's a freaking bullet that you shot out, and because it has that velocity and speed behind it, you can't just go, oh, they changed directions, woo, boom. And if you try to do that with your punches are going to suck. I know I had this one fighter where we had to work on that recently, past couple years, because he would kind of do that with his punches. He would throw them, and then if the person moved at all, he would try to redirect to where they are, And he understood with time that the manner in which he was throwing his punches was far too bound up and controlled and tense if he was able to actually redirect his punch trajectory to grab someone, versus now he snaps his punches nicely and he can't change their direction in mid-flight. All right. So this is just important ways that you can have different levels spar together. So maybe you're at a higher level or lower level, whatever, or you're just part of a team and you want to have your team work a little bit better with each other. Now, there's also a big problem with flow sparring, okay? And I understand the uses and purposes for flow sparring in things like Muay Thai, maybe MMA, stuff like that. Because throwing a kick, like a leg kick, things like that, I understand that's a hard thing to go like 75 with or whatever, right? So I understand some of the reasons and rationale behind this, but again, I'm just talking about a pure boxing context. Flow sparring, again, those same problems come into play where you're dealing with punches that are not coming at the right speed and they do goofy things. And you're able to handle, like I talked about in the earlier video, you're able to handle your car in a way, driving 10 miles an hour in a parking lot and maneuvering around, that if you tried to handle that car the same way and turn at the same, at the same amount of a clip when you're driving at 60 miles an hour, it's not going to be realistic. And that's why it's important when you do a driving test, for instance, to not only drive in a parking lot, but to also get up on the highway and be able to handle the car at speed. So same thing goes with the boxing. I've seen too many people in different programs. They'll flow spar, overly control spar, and then they go into their first fight, and it's just like, whoa, you see the look on their face. They're just like, man, I didn't realize it was like this. It's basically like, I don't know, somebody like wrestling with a 4-year-old, and then all of a sudden they're going to wrestle with an actual adult. They're just like, what the hell? And I've seen that look of shock, from the outside with people that I know have been training like that, and it's not good. All right. Now, also as well, with these two methods I talk about, where there's a benefit to that is that I've also had guys that I don't think they did this purposely, but they end up becoming gatekeepers of certain levels in the gym. So they're at a high level, and you tell them, hey, so-and-so, work with this lesser guy. And they'll kind of either do, they'll do what they think is working, which is literally playing with them, toying with them, almost humiliating them, all right? And that's not good either, right? If I'm going to spar with somebody and it's a lesser level and I just like goof on them so hard and kind of clown them, right? You can say I'm going light, but I'm not going light mentally. I'm literally demeaning them as much as I would if I was trying to knock them the hell out, right? I'm demoralizing them and unencouraging them just as much. So that's an important thing to remember, guys. You might need to hear this, that when you spar people, do it in a way that gives them respect, right? In the sense of if they're part of your team, they train in your gym, whatever. Do it in a way that gives them respect, right? And then when you go against someone who is your own level, that's from another gym, that is not part of your family and your team, give them respect afterwards and everything else. But in the ring, don't give them too much respect. And then when you go to fight someone, don't give them any respect at all, right? Until after the bell, right? But yeah, just an important thing, because I had this guy that would do that. He was really good, really talented. And I would tell him, hey, can you work with this person? And then he would just like humiliate this person by like patty caking them. And then I would tell him like, hey, can you turn it up just a little bit? Like, that's a little too just, I'm playing with you and yeah, you suck. Make it a little bit, just a little bit. And he's like, okay, coach. And then he goes, boom, knocks him out with a body shot. I was like, well, okay, there's two extremes here, all right? And so that's where, again, I recommend those two options. Now, to wrap up the video, guys, let's close out with my 8 safety tips for sparring. All right, so let's jump into it. Number 1. So first one is no multiple days of sparring a week, especially hard sparring, okay? If you're a high-level fighter and you're working with a newbie or a much lower level and your defense is solid, you could skate away with two times a week of sparring, right? Why is that? Because you're not getting hit that much, all right? But if you're doing hard sparring at someone of equal level to you or higher level than you, and you're doing that twice a week, that's far too much. Also need to take times where you don't spar, where you just work on your craft and let your body freaking heal. Because again, the brain can heal itself within reason if you allow it to and give it time. Just like with anything else with the body. But what's so scary about the brain is you won't know it as well as the body, right? Let's say you're working out too much, you feel like, dang, I feel tired, dang, I feel sore. You have some of these things which are obvious, but with the brain, it's not that obvious sometimes, so you don't actually really know often when damage is happening and when the brain isn't healing, all right? But giving it about a week from that kind of subconcussive trauma is a good rule of thumb to just keep yourself safe and healthy. And there's other things with that as well that I'm going to talk about a little bit later throughout these 8 points, all right? The second thing is be okay with taking a knee. I've had plenty of guys take a knee in sparring when maybe something happened, they got rocked, whatever, okay? You need to keep yourself safe at all times. If, let's say, something happens with your attire, right? Your shoelace comes untied, whatever. Your helmet is dislodged. You hurt your hand. Something goofy happens. Take a knee. Make a habit of that. Don't just like stop in the middle of session and be like, hey, coach, my boom, and then you get cracked by the shot because the other guy was locked in and he was ready to shoot whenever. So just be very ready to take a knee. And also as well, if you get rocked by a big shot. Now, of course, that takes a little bit of nuance and context. I don't mean get hit clean. Oh, you got hit clean, so I'm going to take a knee. Like, don't do that crap. I've had people kind of abuse the knee thing. But if you really get, you know when you've been boxing for a little while, if you really get buzzed and rocked and you need a little breather, a little break, take that knee. You get overwhelmed. Take that knee for that pause. That is okay in sparring, and you need to be okay with it because you're making sure that you use sparring for what it needs to be used for. Versus obviously a fight, that's a time where you don't need to be taking knees, all right? So very important concept there. And if you get rocked in a sparring session, I mean really rocked, drop from a headshot, something like that, the legs buckle and you lose and your gait changes, that's a sign of damage. That happens in a sparring session, call it. I know it's very hard. That's where, there's some things that I'm going to talk about later to help you do that, but you need to call it at that point. Let's talk about number 3, kind of similar to these points, and that's a good rule of thumb I heard, which is stop a sparring session about 5 to 10 seconds before you'd stop a real fight. And think about it, within 5 seconds, you can throw a lot of punches, and particularly 10 seconds. So stop that sparring session somewhere between, 5 to 10 seconds before you stop a real fight. So you see someone starting to get beat up on, everything else, if you don't see them able to kind of rally back and at least do some of the things they need to be working on, good idea to take a break on that sparring session, right? So don't let it go beyond, because I've seen the opposite. Maybe you have too, where you will see someone go 3 minutes beyond when you'd stop a normal fight, right? So, because, it's like about 8 unanswered punches before the referee, like an amateur's, can jump in and give a standing 8 count. So same thing with this. Like, you'll have a guy not answering any punches, and it's freaking like 50 punches he hasn't answered, and he's obviously rocked, fatigued. He's not doing anything important. That's another thing too, is that in that situation, it's like if somebody's fatigued and just falling apart, again, these are nuanced things to a degree. If someone is feeling fatigued, that's one thing. But if they're to the point where they're not defending themselves anymore and things like that, and being competitive at all, just stop it. Stop it. Live to spar another day, right? And then that will allow you to fight another day. All right? Then that brings me to point number 4. Don't play sparring like I've talked about earlier. Don't always go 100% either. I feel like I covered that pretty adequately before, but you will run into a lot of trouble if all you do is goof off and play spar, because I see that far too much. And then the other extreme side of that coin is everything's 100% balls to the wall nonstop, because you won't have many partners to train with, and you'll also diminish how much you can actually learn in sparring. Versus if you kind of find that happy point. And sometimes you progress it up and you tack it up to more intense sparring, but I would recommend almost never going to the play sparring level. I've never seen it be of much of a benefit. Maybe you have a different experience, but that's my experience as far as what actually works. Not what you like to do, but what actually helps you progress as a boxer, all right, and shows with your fights. Number 5 is to spar with the coach present, right? And that leads me to those earlier points like number 3 and number 2 is if you have a coach present, they can make those hard calls for you. You know, you don't have to be like, oh, am I hurt? Am I not hurt? A good coach who has some experience can see your gait change and see that, okay, you just got hurt by a headshot that you need to stop. Or that, hey, you're just falling apart. You're not able to adequately defend yourself anymore. A good coach can, hey, let's stop this session, right? Maybe if you're not getting nailed, let you finish out the round, but then that's it. Yeah, we had planned to do 4 rounds. You got exhausted after 2. Hey, sorry, you know, we'll catch you guys next time, that type of thing. But stop that session. That's where it's important for a coach to be present. But to give you a little extra nuance to this point, that doesn't mean the coach always needs to be coaching, in my opinion. What does that mean? I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm very vocal a lot of times in the corner with coaching, sparring, and everything else. But sometimes it is very important to not be being yelled at with instruction, to be able to develop some of your own thought in that ring. I've seen this a little too much where guys will, oh yeah, the example that I give my coaches is they're almost like video game coaching, right? They're acting like it's their words that they're yelling are like buttons that you would hit on the Fight Night video game. So they're like 1-1-2, 1-1-2, 1-3-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, and they're just like bashing those buttons, and they're trying to act. They're trying to box through their person in the ring, and that's not, in my opinion, what good coaching is. Good coaching is guiding. So there might be situations where, yes, you do need to call out something that they need to do then or soon that is a specific punch or even a specific group of punches. But to get too much into that, you're not allowing your guy to think at all and to see things, because you want to bring some calm to that storm. And again, the best, like I tell all my guys, the best boxer that I can work with is someone, and I've had this blessing of happen quite a bit, whether it's sparring or in fights, where I'm not saying anything, right? That's the best thing. What I am saying is, there you go. It's one of my catchphrases. There you go. And nice, good work. And honestly, just, it's funny. Like, if you're just a cheerleader coach, that's no good, right? If you're not able to give the nuance of the context. But when your guy is doing the job that he's supposed to be doing, he's doing everything right. That's where you can just be a cheerleader coach and just be, that's it, because he's doing everything. And then maybe you remind him of something, or maybe in the corner you say, okay, you know, this round, you know, you were doing this and this. Let's add this one thing to it, and we're golden, right? Or if you just do a little bit less of this or a little bit more of this, we'll be good. And that's a pretty picture to sit into, where you can just be a cheerleader coach, right? Or really, even better said, positive reinforcement, right? Because sometimes when you're sparring or in a fight, you'll do something and you don't know if that was the right or the wrong something. And too often, you'll hear it when it's the wrong something, and you'll get reinforced on what was wrong versus what was right. Okay? So that's just an important little nuance before I move on to the next point, is think about that with yourself, with your training, or if you're coaching, or you have other team members that you kind of help out, is how much are you reinforcing the positive, right? How much are you giving that reward verbally when the job is done right versus when the job is done wrong? It's easiest, we're all habitually biased to focusing on the negative. Don't do this, don't do that, stop doing this, stop. You need to do less of that, versus, there you go, that was right, do more of that, perfect, again, keep that going, keep doing that type of stuff. I've seen that help change people's trajectory psychologically in the ring, and they do more of the right things, okay? But it's something we always got to remind ourselves of, because all of us are wired to focus on the negative, and sometimes we can coach too much off the negative. And as fighters, we can think too much about the negative, and hey, you think too much about what you did that you got nailed on versus what's the other shot you did before that which nailed him, or the move that you did that set you up nice to get that shot. You forget those things, and you remember the thing that hurt, right? All right. And then last thing on point number 5, guys, is also, if you're a boxer in a gym, shut the hell up. Shut the hell up when your teammates spar. Shut the hell up. If you want to be a coach, go try to be a coach. Go do that. That's fine. That's cool. But, I'm really happy that with our facility and when I coach, other fighters, they understand that and understand when it is warranted to maybe like they can say something to me like, hey, I noticed this. Like, yeah, I'm happy. Like, I'm not perfect. I can't see everything. I'm happy for you to give me your input. That's fine here and there. But when you have guys sparring and the whole gym is yelling out this and that and saying do this and that, they always need to shut the hell up. Shut the hell up. And you focus on you, right? You focus on you. If I'm going to be sparring up next, I don't need to be yelling to my team member up in the ring, doing this, that, and that, if he has a coach. If he doesn't, and that's my job, that's different. But, let the coach do his job. Let the fighter do his job. Too often, these more rookie-minded people, and even people with, like, experience, meaning they've been around for a long time, but they've stayed at this rookie level, and I remember when I first started coaching, I had these thoughts, too. I was like, oh, man, that coach isn't saying anything. That coach not doing anything. Man, someone got to do something. But actually, there was a reason. There's a reason why the coach was shut up. There's a reason why the coach wasn't telling their kid what to do in that moment, because there were other things they were working on, all right? So just back the hell off, worry about yourself. And again, if you want to be a coach and you're not, go ahead and do that, all right? But if you're a fighter and you're a boxer, focus on you, man. Make you better. You see all the mistakes that, this other guy's doing, and lock in and be like, okay, I'm not going to make those mistakes. Because then too often those guys that are so mouthy, they go in and they make the same gosh darn mistakes. All right. Number 6, petroleum jelly. Big on the Vaseline. Vaseline, petroleum jelly. Put it all over that helmet. Put it on the gloves. When you spar, both guys, put it on their gloves. Put it everywhere, on the face, everywhere. And try to do it in between rounds. Every round. Because so much nicer when punches slide off versus stick and rip, right? Also, it's going to stop cuts and things like that, but it literally can make those punches less concussive. Big, big tip that far few people use enough. And I have to remind myself to do it because it's that extra thing you got to think about. But it's honestly, it's far more beneficial to stop concussions than a helmet. All right? Controversial statement there. But if you look at the research, helmets don't do a lot to stop concussions. And they haven't done a research study on Vaseline or petroleum jelly being used or not used, but I bet you'd see at least a small marginal correlation because that's what I've personally seen in my own anecdotal experience. All right? Now, 2 more points, guys, before we wrap up. Number 7 is be rested before you spar. What does that mean? Does it mean I can't warm up before I spar? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying don't freaking do your hardest workout of the week the day before you spar. Too often, a guy will show up in the sparring freaking stale or just burnt by the end of the week or whatever. And because of that holds back their technical development in their sparring session. Because remember, sparring is the most important thing outside of fighting, right? If you do your thing on the mitts, you do your thing on the bag, you do your things in drills, you do your things in shadow boxing, the next level is you got to be able to do that in sparring. If you can't do that in sparring, it's not going to translate to the fight. And remember, at the end of the day, sometimes it's hard to keep the stuff in mind, but that's what you're training for. You're training for your action in the ring. And I don't care what you can do outside of the ring, on the bag, with your jump rope. I don't care. What can you do in there? What you can do in there is what's important. And if you can't do it in there because you're stale, because you trained too hard the day before, stuff like that, you lifted weights the day before, some crap like that, you're hurting yourself, all right? And you're not giving yourself the best chance. Now, last one, number 8, obvious one. But again, I see the obvious be missed. Be really, 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 really hydrated. Be very hydrated. Because remember, the thing that protects your brain is not your freaking helmet. It's not whatever crap. It's not strengthening your jaw necessarily. The thing that protects your brain is the fluid around your brain, okay? The cerebral fluid that sits there that your brain basically floats in. That is what cushions it and protects it. So you want to make sure you're as hydrated as possible so that you have enough there. You don't need to be sweating yourself out in the sauna the day before you spar or any other crazy nonsense like that. And you need to make sure you make a big point of drinking enough water so that your urine is clear and you're hydrated. All right? And the best way to get hydrated is water. Also, make sure you have some salt on your food and things like that. But don't get overly sold on Gatorade, which, by the way, Gatorade and Powerade, the amount of potassium, sodium, and magnesium that they have in them is less than actually what you even get in like an orange juice. So don't even, right? It's a whole nother topic. But I remember one of my first guys I took to fights, he had to make weight because my dad had me fight like right at the weight I was at. But he had to lose a couple pounds. And we were at a gas station, and I was going to get him like, ideally, I love the Pedialyte because Pedialyte has a lot of magnesium, potassium, and sodium, which are your main electrolytes. But we weren't near any place where they had that. So I went to the gas station, looked at stuff, and I was like, okay. I was like, about to go get a Gatorade, about to go get a Powerade. And I was like, well, let me just look at the back of the package real quick, or the bottle, to compare that with what options I have. So I was like, okay, this has that much, this has that much. I was like, oh, there's orange juice. So let me see how much potassium orange juice has in it. Oh, wow, orange juice has a lot more than these two combined. You'd have to drink like 4 of these to get that. I was like, damn. So yeah, so now there's more products out there that probably have higher levels. Coconut water is one that's good. Has a lot of potassium and magnesium. So make sure, though, you drink enough water so you help keep your organs operating well, keep your mind clear, but also protect your brain. Your performance will drastically increase if you're chronically a little bit underhydrated. And an easy way to know that, it's kind of nasty, but by the color of your urine, right? If it's clear, you're good. If it's not, if you don't hit a clear urine a day, you're underhydrated, all right? Okay, guys. Hope you like this video on sparring. I hope this gave you at least one thing beneficial, or reminded you of one thing that you can take into your boxing training. And make sure you comment, put your thoughts below. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you share this with someone that you think might benefit from this. I really appreciate your support, and I'll see you on the next video.